In this video, I'm going to take you through our solar PV and Tesla Powerwall 2 performance for October 2020 here in the UK, along with our Tesla Model 3 and Hyundai Kona electric costs and usage. So stay tuned. Hi, John here and welcome. This is a visual representation of how much sun we had in October. It's actually worse than that. Yeah, so not great, really. So I'm going to take you through our solar PV and Tesla Powerwall 2 performance for the month of October 2020 here in the East Midlands in the UK. Plus the usual stats and usage performance for our Tesla Model 3 and our Hyundai Kona Electric and My Energy, Eddi and Zappi devices. In the description down below, there's a list of all our components for our system, so please have a look down there if you're not familiar with our setup and want to know more, or you just want to refresh your memory. I'll bring a diagram up as well so you can have a quick look at that. Jump straight into it. Let's have a look at our monthly solar performance for October. So our solar panels produced a total of 299 kilowatt hours, and we had an average daily solar generation of 9.6 kilowatt hours for the month. As you'll see in a bit later, it was a really poor month for sunshine. Yeah, not great. Do let me know in the comments down below, in the comment section, how you got on with your solar performance for the month. I'd really like to hear what people's total generation was for the month and also their kilowatts size of their solar system. Plus, other people actually read the comments, so not just me. And they like to have a look at what other people have done as well. So by doing that, you're doing a public service by commenting and sharing. So thank you for that, if those that do, as it were. If we have a look at both arrays, I'll bring that chart up for you. Our original 4 kilowatts array produced 188 kilowatt hours for the month, and our newer 2.34 kilowatt array produced 111 kilowatt hours for the month. In November 2020, it will actually be the first month where we can compare like-for-like systems, because it's a year on since the additional solar array was added. Before then, we just had the 4 kilowatt solar array on our roof. If you have a look at that 4 kilowatt system, the performance at 188 kilowatt hours for the month, as you can see, it's well down on October 2019 total of 243. So not great at all, really. Very poor indeed. So have a look at the Powerwall and the solar contribution to our overall self-power. The Powerwall is set in cost-saving mode, which if you recall, those that tune in regularly, we swapped from self-powered mode in the middle of August to cost-saving mode. We're with Octopus Energy and on their Agile tariff. And with this tariff, we follow the half-hourly wholesale electricity rates, which fluctuates over the course of the day. I've previously done a video on all about that, so you can find it up here in the link. Yeah, it's up there, I think, because I have to do it in reverse. And it's also down in the description if you want to check it out to learn a bit more about that. Within the Agile tariff, there's a peak period between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. every day. And this is the time when the maximum demand of the grid is reflected in the prices. So the prices are really high. The price at peak is normally around 25 to 30 pence per unit for electricity. It's actually capped at 35 pence per kilowatt hour or per unit as we register them over here in the UK. With the Powerwall in cost saving mode, it makes sure it has enough energy stored to provide power to the house during that peak period. The Powerwall can provide a 5 kilowatt continuous load, which means we can use the electric hob and the electric oven without pulling from the grid, unless we go all rings on full and both ovens on. But we don't do that. So for the month of October, our house was 48% of the time self-powered. This power came from the Powerwall and from the solar contributions, not that there were many solar contributions. And this figure is about the same as October 2019, where we were 49% self-powered for the month. However, in October 2019, we just had a single 4 kilowatt PV system on the roof and not the current 6.34 kilowatt system that we have now. So this makes our 48% self-powered for October 2020 just gone. Not such a good figure. Let's have a look at the peak and off-peak power chart. The Powerwall did a good job of providing our power usage at the peak period. So let me show you. The end of our solar day is around 4 p.m. at the moment, which means that the Powerwall is going to work a lot harder. So between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. it's going to be supplying the house. Earlier in the year, where we had sun up till about 7 p.m. during the summer, if not later. The Powerwall is really pushing hard to make sure that it can provide all the power to the house during the peak period and not pull from the grid. The months along the bottom on this chart are only populated with data when we are actually in cost-saving mode with the Powerwall. So if we're in self-powered mode, then you won't see any data along the bottom. And as you can see, we were 98% self-powered during peak, that peak time of 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. over the month, which is great news. And the remaining 2% of that came from the grid. And I've worked out that that 2% cost us £3.67 for the month and around 15 kilowatt hours of electricity we pulled. This works out about 23 pence per unit. At off-peak time, the Powerwall was able to supply the house usage for just 4% of the total amount of time over the month. This month we pulled more from the grid during off-peak due to having less solar activity, and you'll see that as we work through the rest of the charts. If we have a look on the year-on-year chart, here's October's generation, which goes back to 2011. The totals for years 2011 through to 2019 are for the original 4 kilowatt system. The October 2020 figures is for both arrays. And if you recall, the original 4 kilowatt array produced 188 kilowatt hours in October, which means that October 2020 was our worst month for solar production since records began. Which sounds very dramatic. 9 years, over 9 years. Yeah, it was our worst month. Oh, incidentally, I was going to do a 10-year review of our solar panels, put it in the community tab to say I was going to do it, and did anybody want to know anything in particular? And then I worked out we've actually only had it 9 years, so hold that thought for 12 months, and I shall do it September of next year. You also see that, looking at that chart, even if you had in the additional 2.34 kilowatt array, the total is still pretty poor, and we're in joint third place with October 2012, and you know all of those previous figures are just a 4 kilowatt array, so that's how bad the sunshine was for us in October. Powerwall, then let's have a look at the Powerwall in and out chart. It had a round trip efficiency of 87% for the month, based on what we managed to store versus what we managed to pull out and supply the house. We stored 325 kilowatt hours and it supplied 284 kilowatt hours. Really, because of the lower levels of sunshine, much of that 225 kilowatt hours we stored would have come from the grid during the off-peak rates to tide us over through the peak period. So let's have a look at the day-by-day chart. The legend is blue is house usage, yellow is solar generation, orange is excess solar exported back to the grid, and red is import from the grid. And as you can see, lots of blue and lots of red. Yellow, very scarce across the chart. Just 3 days during the month where our solar generation was over 20 kilowatt hours for any given day. We had 11 days where we generated between, over 10 kilowatts hours in a day, but less than 20 kilowatt hours in a day. which left 17 days where we generated less than 10 kilowatt hours in a day. So yeah, not a great month for solar production. Our worst day was the 3rd of October with a measly 1.5 kilowatt hours generated across the whole day. Yeah, it was a very grey day indeed. If we look at the October totals, just scroll down, have a look at those. The house used 1,104 kilowatt hours. Solar, as you know, produced 299 kilowatt hours. We exported 40.4 kilowatt hours back to the grid, and we imported from the grid 874 kilowatt hours. And we'll look at those two last figures in a bit more detail in a second. So in summary, it was high house usage, more reliance on pulling from the grid stroke Powerwall to basically run the house or charge the battery. So we look at the daily grid and house usage chart. Higher grid usage is evident in this particular chart. This tracks our average daily house usage and our average daily grid usage. Our average daily house usage was slightly down on September at 35.6 kilowatt hours. However, because of the poor solar generation performance, we pulled a lot more from the grid. So our average daily pull from the grid was at a very large 28.2 kilowatt hours, almost double what we pulled in September, which in turn is actually double what we pulled in August. I'm hoping this isn't a continuing trend. Let's have a look at what we sent to the grid. So we sent 40.4 kilowatt hours of excess solar generation back to the grid in October, which is half as much as in September. So I guess a small win there. The total was made up of little amounts of surplus solar that we were basically unable to use on a particular day. On every day, it was less than 2 kilowatt hours. Now, let me explain about cost-saving mode on the Powerwall 2 if you're not familiar with that. If the weather is typically English and sort of ping-ponging between sunny one day and then overcast and miserable the next and then back to sunny the day after, typical UK weather, the algorithm in the Tesla Powerwall has a really tough job. The algorithm tracks historical usage, a historical solar surplus back to the grid, historical solar generation, and sort of tracks patterns or usage. There's no forward-looking weather forecasting built in, which is a big oversight in my opinion, and it certainly has an impact when the weather is ping-ponging, as I've just explained in the example. So look, it looks at the historical data and it decides whether to charge up and by how much during the overnight off-peak cheap rates. Its aim, as I've said before, is to ensure that there's enough charge in the battery to get us through that 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. peak time each day. So let me give you sort of a worst case scenario, draw you a bit of a picture, and you can see what's happening. And this is actually was happening in October for us. So overnight, the Powerwall decides to fully charge because there was very little solar generation the previous day. So it charges up and then the new day dawns and it's bright and sunny. The Powerwall is full. So some surplus solar that we've generated goes back to the grid. That night, it decides to leave a little headroom in the battery because today we had excess solar, which we sent back to the grid. The next day dawns and it's a grey, dull day with no solar activity, which means no charge in the Powerwall from the solar panels. The Powerwall then has to pull from the grid during the day to get us through that peak period on battery power if it feels there isn't sufficient surplus in the battery to get us through. Unfortunately, I guess being an early adopter with the Powerwall, we have the Gateway 1. And there's no facility to specify a backup percentage in the battery. This is a feature only available in the current Gateway 2 unit. And at around 1.5 to 2,000 pounds for the upgrade, it's sort of very low on my to-do list. In fact, it's sort of not really on my to-do list. Yeah, it may happen, it may not happen. We'll see. So yeah, currently it's not a perfect system. Even with the Gateway 2, it would still bounce and ping pong as the scenario I've just described. However, it's fair to say on balance, it does get it right more often than it gets it wrong. And that can certainly be seen from my figures. Our October figures, just 2%, 15 kilowatts pulled from the grid during the peak rate time. So yeah, it does do a very good job. We're striving for perfection here, obviously. So this is what we pulled from the grid. So in October, we pulled a total of 874 kilowatt hours from the grid. I've already mentioned the reasons for the extra usage, so I shan't repeat myself here. Let's have a look at the eddy. In the month of October, the eddy diverted a measly 17 kilowatt hours of excess solar energy to heat our hot water. Gives us a yearly total to date of 371 kilowatt hours with an overall accumulative since installation on the 22nd of July 2019 of 444 kilowatt hours. So yeah, cost saving for the month, about £1 for the heating of our hot water from Sunshine, so not massive savings. Let's have a look at the Zappi. So these are the stats for our 2 electric cars. The Tesla Model 3, that covered 1,090 miles during the month, which brings our total mileage to 7,673 miles. The Kona covered just 81 miles during the month and has a total mileage of 10,403 miles. The Kona had a very small charge added during the month as it really did very little mileage and had a high state of charge. The Tesla Model 3 had 3 supercharging sessions. Those 3 sessions added 132.27 kilowatt hours. These are done at no costs, thanks to those of you who used our referral code when ordering your Teslas. So if you do use our referral code, then we each benefit from 3 supercharging miles. So thank you very much for that, for those that have done that. That's much appreciated. Charging on the Zappi at home, we added 327.99 kilowatt hours to the Model 3. And as you can see, it's split between grid and green energy, 89% from the grid and just a paltry 11% green solar. Both cars have been really cheap to run. Obviously the Kona very much so because it didn't do many miles. For the Tesla, it was £19.69 for home charging for the 1,000 odd miles. And for the Kona, it was 53 pence for the 41.66 kilowatt hours added. 11% of that was from solar, so I've taken that off the total. So it's like 41 kilowatt hours is what we got charged. So yeah, another cheap month for motoring, despite covering almost 1,200 miles between the 2 cars. Oh yeah, let me show you this. So let me talk you through the month of October on the Agile tariff in a little bit more detail. We had one day during the month with plunge pricing, which means pricing was negative for a period of time. And plunge pricing typically occurs when there's lots of wind power during the night. We were paid to use electricity basically from 12:30 a.m. through to 5:30 a.m. In the morning. And that was on the 25th of October during the early hours of the morning. And during that day, that 25th of October, we managed to consume 56 kilowatt hours, with most of that during that negative pricing period. And we got paid £1.35 for using electricity. So we had the kiln on, the dishwasher on, and the car was being charged as well. So, yeah. But that was actually our first negative pricing day since we joined the Agile tariff back in July. The chart I'm showing you is from the Octopus Watch app, which is on my iPhone, and it shows usage and costs during October. I've not been able to reconcile these figures with the Octopus online account yet, as my electricity bills aren't currently available there. They always take a few weeks or so to appear. I guess the things that I've taken away from that with this data is the difference in grid usage between my figures and the Tesla Powerwall app. That shows 873 kilowatt hours for the month and the Octopus Watch app states 921.1 kilowatt hours for the month, which is a sort of 48 kilowatt hour difference. The Octopus Watch app should be more accurate as it's using the API data directly from Octopus Energy and from my smart meter, which I suspect that's probably the case. I shall cross-reference that with the account, with the bill when I get it from Octopus Energy. Oh yeah, have a look at the average unit rate there. So it's 6.52 pence per kilowatt hour, which is actually great over the course of the month, especially as the month was so poor in terms of solar production. I had to rely quite heavily on the grid. And certainly the benefit of the battery is coming into play there. So being able to store cheap electricity during off-peak rates to supply the house during the peak rate. Also, if you have a look at the chart which shows usage over the 24-hour period for the month, there's actually very little usage between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. at that peak rate. So most of our usage happens between 12:30 midnight through to 5 a.m. in the morning. That's when we run the kilns, charge the car if we need to, all that kind of thing. If you scroll to the top of that page, it shows the cost for the month being £66.99, including VAT, including the standing charge of 21 pence per day. So yeah, I'm really pleased with that, considering the amount of electricity we've used. Finally, we're getting our smart meters exchanged on the 30th of November, which should resolve our phantom draw issue that we've been having for the last 18 months. And I'll certainly be doing a video on that when that happens. So yeah, that's it. Please comment, like, share, subscribe, because all these actions help to get the video shown to more people and also helps my channel grow. So thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next video. All right, take care. Bye.